Hi, welcome to Talking at No One, the show where I, Aloney, hang out by myself, because I need to write this right now. This week, yet again, I am by myself to work on an idea that I am very passionate about. Over the last month, I have had on my main channel a bunch of essays trying to explain the unexplainable series known as Kingdom Hearts. It has been interesting. I've decided to see what stories I can come up with in that universe. Enjoy. So let's just jump into this and really figure this stuff out. In my mind, if you want to adapt Kingdom Hearts, there's sort of 4 options you can go for. And I kind of want to explore each one and see which one would be the most interesting to write for the bonus episode coming up. The first one is the simplest idea. Take the game Kingdom Hearts, all the games, you break them into season arcs, not even full seasons, but just arcs, and you turn it into a straight-up shonen anime. I mean, that's already what it is. It's an anime, and then it has Disney characters in it already. So all you'd really have to do to make it a show to watch is just turn it into an anime. You'd center the show around Sora, Donald, and Goofy, and they would be searching for Riku and Kairi in the first season. And the way it would work is you would jump between Sora, Donald, and Goofy, and then throughout the series you would jump over to Riku and see what he's doing. And I guess to Kairi, and you'd have to bump Kairi's character up a lot because Kairi is very basic. I think it would be a really good shonen because Sora's got that real shonen protagonist energy where he's kind of a flat art character that doesn't really grow or change. And he gets that sort of dark side when Roxas, becomes a part of him again. But Riku is the, angsty rival. And it, all perfectly works out as sort of a shonen. The Heartless attack them in the beginning, and it's all confusing. They grow up on the island together. You get the pilot of them all on the island. Sora and Riku fighting with swords. The racing. You get the rivalry. You may even can play up the, they're all kids, so they're all sort of friends in the beginning. And it's all like, oh, we're going to make it. And then, jump forward, and it's like, oh, shit. You could do it season by season and do game by game, or you could time skip and go to them being older. But for the most part, with the sort of story of Kingdom Hearts, you'd just break it by game, and that's each arc. So if it was an anime, you would have Sora, Riku, and Kairi are friends. They all live together on this island. We introduce each character, how Riku is the strong, angsty rival, who's the older one. Sora is the young, innocent, sort of heroic, courage-filled kid who doesn't really understand anything. And then Kairi is the wise sort of one. You'd have to play her up because her main thing in the regular game is to just sort of be an object. And it's kind of depressing. So you'd have to play up her whole royal vibe. I think she's actually a good character on the surface, when she talks and when she acts and when she does things. But they don't give her anything to do. And they fix it in the later games with Aqua. And I almost wish they'd just do Aqua, fucking Ventus, and Terra. Because the 3 of them are way better characters. And they kind of took the ideas they had with the first 3 and just made them better. But let's just say you're stuck with Sora and all of them. And it's pretty easy to do. You just do each arc is a different game of Kingdom Hearts. And then if you want to make it more interesting, you could skip entire arcs and just do the main 3 games. Or you could do each individual arc as sort of OVAs. It's really up to you. I think you would do it Kingdom Hearts 1, then you'd do Chain of Memories as its own arc, because it's very interesting to go back through all the worlds before, but it's all confusing, and he's running through a tower, and then Riku's chasing him. And you're like, oh shit, how did Riku get out of the Land of Darkness? But then it turns out it's not him, it's a clone. Where's Kairi and all this, And you could get Naminé and the organization and sort of introduce each of them as these sort of bad anti-hero characters, especially with Axel being the stand-in for the good one. And that's all very interesting. And I think you would do what the game collections do, which is you would skip 358/2, and 358/2 would be an OVA, a 3-part OVA, where you just go and you see Sora and Axel and Zion's life as Zion, Roxas, and Axel just sort of kill Heartless, and Roxas is all angsty and trying to figure out what's going on. And I think that would be a good hour and a half 3-parter. And it already is a movie, so there isn't really much you have to do. Maybe zhuzh it up a little bit. Then Kingdom Hearts 2 would be an arc, and you'd get Sora waking up, and the whole Roxas summer vacation story, which is really fucking dark and a cool intro for a third season. It changes everything up. It adds the nobodies. It's like perfect for like the third season. Then you would go in and you would do the mid-season break of like, oh shit, they gotta go back to all the worlds again because the organization is doing stuff. Then they go to the world that never was. They fight against Xemnas. It's all cool. We find out that, the whole Riku angst, like, is he the bad guy shit. After all of that, you would get the Birth by Sleep prequel. So you do the Birth by Sleep story, which is my favorite, and how they are like way better than the original characters, and that they would go through all the classic worlds and then find Sora and Riku, and Ventus would almost die, and then Sora's soul would merge with his to help him live, and that's why Roxas exists, and it's all the complicated shit of all that. Aqua would get trapped in the land of darkness, and then you would do the Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop sort of OVA. I don't think Dream Drop needs to be its own story, but you know what? It does have plot-related shit in it, so maybe it would be a good, like, Inception type thing, because that's what Dream Drop is. Clearly, Nomura just saw Inception and was like, oh, let's do that. Because basically, the whole plot of that game is that Riku and Sora need to take their Mark of Mastery exam like how the Birth by Sleep kids did, and they're trying to become Keyblade Masters. And in order to do that, they have to go into the sleeping worlds, all the worlds that have been destroyed by the Heartless, and they need to fix them. In the end, it is revealed that, Xehanort has been time traveling and shit, and it kind of makes everything weird, but it sets up Kingdom Hearts 3 in the idea that, well, since Organization 13 is gone, what do we do now? And it's like, oh, because it's 13 Xehanort type things. It's like Xehanort and then a bunch of the people that he brought back with time travel. So you can get all kinds of weird villains from all over the timeline for the last season, which is Kingdom Hearts 3. And then when it's all over, you get the whole Mark Hamill. I wish Leonard Nimoy was still alive to be Xehanort, but they didn't do that. Two of them would, act, and then you'd get the whole finale of how Kingdom Hearts 3 went. And you'd basically do the entire game, like all the games, but as seasonal arcs, like how Castlevania does it, where they just do, an adaptation so it sort of animate tropes. And it would be really fucking good. So there isn't really much to write with that. That took me like 10 minutes, which is why I have 4 ideas to work on. So the Kingdom Hearts anime, the shonen, pretty fucking simple. The second thing I would want to do is I would definitely want to do a prequel, but if you can't do that, then you could go even farther back and you could just make up new Keyblade Masters and do before the war, and just set up a new villain instead of Xehanort, because you could still get the Master of Masters in there. Really thinking about that, I don't know if a prequel would be all that much more interesting, because they have the Unversed, but they don't really have the Heartless or the Nobodies, and it kind of pulls away a lot of the fun of the cool shit, and there really isn't much to do with all that. There is the cool-ass Keyblade War. You could probably play with that in sort of a prequel, but I don't think that would work all that much, You could do a Kingdom Hearts sequel, which would be really interesting. I feel like I'm probably going to end up exploring that, and I kind of want to do a Kingdom Hearts live action. How would you do that? Because Kingdom Hearts is clearly an anime, so it'd be kind of against type to go and do a full live action thing. But what would that be like, Would that be good? Would it even be worth it? Because whenever someone makes animation, there's an old animation rule you learn in animation training that you have to know whether or not you should do an animation before you make it. Why should this be animated is a big question. And I feel like live action people never are taught to ask the question, should this be live action? And the answer is no, it shouldn't be live action. But it would be fun to be like, oh, what if it was, though? My thing with Kingdom Hearts is, yeah, you could do a fun shonen show that's for teenagers, and then adults could go back and watch it nostalgically, and it'd do pretty well. You could even, weaken it and make it shittier and do it for kids, full-on kids, and you could do the prequel where it's kids in really old Disney cartoons. But I don't think that's very fun. What's the most fun idea to work with? And it feels like, for me, aside from writing a Kingdom Hearts anime opening, which if I had the time, I would. But instead of doing that, what could I do to create my own Kingdom Hearts? That's usually how these writing things work, right? Is I take an idea, and then I'm like, what if I did that? So that's enough of the, it's almost like I just did a recap for you, because that's what the anime is. It's just, hey, here's everything, that's what the show would be. I feel fairly confident that I could actually make Kingdom Hearts the anime, because I know the story inside and out, which I still don't understand how nobody understands this story. They always overcomplicate it. They're like, oh, it's so complicated. You got nobodies, and then there's Heartless, and then there's Unversed, too? I didn't know that. It's fucking simple, okay? I took, like, you know, an entire month to try to explain it, but if I really had to simplify it into, like, a paragraph, all of Kingdom Hearts is about there's an ultimate darkness that's going to fill the world, like the dark side, and it's going to eat everything. All the shadows in the world are going to come to life, and they're going to rip your heart out of your chest, rip your soul out, and eat it. And then you are going to become one of them. And when they rip your soul out, your soul comes together and makes a Heartless, and your body stays a shell if you're strong enough, and becomes a nobody. And the two of them go around doing shit while you're dead. And if both of them die, you come back. That's all it is. That's all Kingdom Hearts is that. And then there's a bad guy. His name's Xehanort. He's from the past. He's from the prequels. He was played by Leonard Nimoy. He becomes a Heartless at one point. Then his nobody also does a bunch of crazy shit. They kill both of those. Then he comes back as an old man again. And then he discovers time travel, goes back in time, gives himself time travel. And then you fight all the different versions of him in the finale. It's not that complicated if you don't think about it. People get caught up in the minutia of the details. But really, all the plot of Kingdom Hearts is like 3 groups of 3 kids fight a bunch of fucking dark things. Each game is about 3 different kids who fight a bunch of dark things. They got swords, they're keys, they unlock the worlds, they lock the worlds. I know the more I try to explain how Kingdom Hearts isn't hard to understand, the harder it is to understand. But it is easy to understand. I feel like fucking Heimdall, where I see all and no one else sees it. And I'm like, dude, come on. Whatever. There's other people who understand Kingdom Hearts. I'm not the only one who gets it. I can't be. I can't be the only person that understands this story. I gotta say, though, if you call yourself a writer or a storyteller and you can't understand Kingdom Hearts by just playing the games, then you're not a good storyteller, because you should be able to understand this shit. It's pretty fucking simple if you just play through it all. But anyway, I don't know. So I'm going to make my own Kingdom Hearts. So how would I do that? This is going to take a while now. This is part of the podcast where the podcast slows the fuck down and I have to figure shit out. So I'm going to go to Google Translate. Okay, the first thing you need to do to create your own Kingdom Hearts story is you need a new trio. You need 3 characters who are friends, who are important. 2 guys and a girl. That's how it goes. That's what Nomura came up with. It has weird results and doesn't really work all the time. It only really worked in 2 out of the 3 cases. Sora, Riku, and Kairi are cool characters over time, and we've grown nostalgic of them. But compared to the other trios, they're not the best one. The best one is Aqua, Ventus, and Terra, because they're all older. Terra is way older. Aqua is a lot smarter and sort of like the teacher of the group. And then Ventus is like the dumb little brother. So it works, and they definitely feel more familial, and there's less like shipping between them. The trio should be friends. They shouldn't be loved. And I think Nomura tried to imply that when Riku was like, you should eat the fruit with Kairi, and then Sora was like, I don't want it. But it's clear that in Kingdom Hearts, Sora and Kairi were supposed to get together, but Nomura doesn't understand relationships, I guess, and it just doesn't work. So then a lot of fans shipped Riku and Sora because they were teenagers, and that's what teenagers do. When there's a ship and the male-female lead sucks, they make a male-male lead in a hope. But I actually think that there's no relationship in any of them, and I think that the same exact thing kind of happened with Roxas, Zion, and Axel, and it shouldn't have either. And I think it's a little bit more ridiculous because Axel and Roxas are clearly different ages, like very large gaps. It's not like Sora and Riku where it's like a 2-year gap. It's weird to ship any of them because they're all young, and I know we were all teenagers when we did that, but like, it's weird. It is weird. But I think Ventus, Aqua, and Terra are the best ones 100% because they, 1, have the easiest setup, 2, there's no question of what their backstories are. Like, Sora's mom fucking says Sora, like, calls for Sora after he runs away, and then he's gone until he's like 17 years old. What the fuck was that like when he comes home? He doesn't even go home. He disintegrates. So what the fuck does his mom do? All of his friends show up on the island, and she's like, oh yeah, did she forget him during the entire year where he was gone, where everybody started forgetting him? Did his mom forget him? What the fuck? What happened to Sora's mom? That's my question. That it bothers me every night. They didn't have to have her ask for him. It could have been like a Peter Pan type island. So, unrelated to the whole Sora's mom thing and the which trio's better thing, the key here is that there's 3 kids, 2 dudes, and a girl. Okay, so to keep to the naming convention, let's come up with 3 characters for Kingdom Hearts. Now, in the trio, they always have the same 3 sort of names, except for the Axel, Zion, and Roxas one, which is just confusing and odd. They just added an X into a bunch of random names. Like, Lee has nothing to do with any of that shit. They didn't really stick to the naming convention for them. The way they named the Kingdom Hearts trio, or the way Nomura did it, is he does Sora means sky, Kairi means water, and Riku means land, I think. I'm pretty sure that's what those mean. Then, in the prequel trilogy, he does wind for Ventus, he does water for Aqua, obviously, and he does earth for Terra, also obviously. So, in creating this sort of name convention thing, what kind of vibe are we going for? Before we name the trilogy, what time period is this going to take place in? Because in Kingdom Hearts, there's sort of three. There's the prequel times with Birth by Sleep. There's before that, in the, like, long time ago, ancient times, which is, like, Union Cross and all that weird shit. And then there's also, I guess you could say, the time after Kingdom Hearts. Now, let's just first say off, we're not doing at the same time as Kingdom Hearts. That's ridiculous. I don't think just doing Sora, Roxas, and Kairi in live action would work, because it's too much shit that you have to change, and you don't want to change the actual characters. The key of a good live action adaptation is to do the same thing, but different. It's like writing a sequel where you're in the same universe, but all the characters are different. I think that's the best way to do it, because I think when you try to adapt the individual character, the first time, it's going to be bad no matter what you do. So you might as well do something new with it, rather than do the original. So the question is, what time period? Now, as much as it is tempting to do the ancient times, I think it's a trap. I think the Keyblade War is cool, but I think it's cooler because you don't know what it was. Because there's just a graveyard with Keyblades. That image is cooler than a battle of Keyblades. I don't care what anyone says. If you go to the battle, it's not as cool as if you went to what's left of the battle. And clearly we're going to go to the Keyblade graveyard. Like, no shit. So, if I were to do Kingdom Hearts, what language should I make the names in? Let's see. You know what? Instead of going into Google Translate, like most people do, I'm going to go to a thesaurus. Ooh, Gale is a good name. Ooh, Zephyr. Zephyr could be cool. Alright. After much deliberation, way too much deliberation to admit, like way too long, I have found 3 names for these characters. Our Sora stand-in, our representation of Sky, the more innocent one, the kid brother one, is Gale, as in wind. The strong and angsty one, based on Riku, the more down-to-earth and powerful one, is going to be called Ash. I couldn't find another name for Earth that wasn't already taken in Kingdom Hearts. And the last one, the cooler Kairi, not as cool Aqua, is going to be Bryn. Now, I couldn't find a nautical name that really worked, so I chose Brine and changed it to Bryn. It's kind of loose, but, you know, who cares about these naming conventions anyway? But I think Bryn is a really good name for a sort of Kairi-esque character who isn't as shitty as Kairi is. I'd say an Aqua-esque character. So, we have our characters. There's Ash, Gale, and Bryn. Let's go through the various questions I have that help me come up with a story. First thing we're going to ask is, where do we start? Now, Ash, Gale, and Bryn are the trio, so we need them to all be friends together, living together. And they need to have a common goal, and then something bad needs to happen to them. So in this sort of first act, where would be a cool place in the Kingdom Hearts universe for all of them to live? Now, at first I thought we should put them in the ruins of the Kingdom Hearts place from Birth by Sleep, and they're like training there. Then I thought Twilight Town would be cool, but that shit's been taken. I don't want to put them on a random island in the middle of nowhere. I want them to be in a city of some sorts. I want it to be very different from the standard Kingdom Hearts vibe. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, what is a city that we haven't seen a lot of, and that I would love to see what happened to it? To really solidify the idea that this is going to be a sequel, that this is after Kingdom Hearts, we should set it in Hollow Bastion. Because in Kingdom Hearts, if you don't know, there's a place called Hollow Bastion. It used to be called a place called Radiant Garden, and then it was destroyed, and it was turned into Maleficent's sort of clockwork castle, where she keeps all her power in the first Kingdom Hearts. It was used to cause the Kingdom Hearts to open for a minute, and for Riku to be trapped in the Dark Realm. Then, in Kingdom Hearts 2, it gets turned back into Radiant Garden at the end, where it's still kind of destroyed, but they've fixed it up. And in Kingdom Hearts 3, you don't go there. It's the Final Fantasy place, so why not have the Final Fantasy characters be from there? If it's now been reclaimed, you immediately get the nostalgia of them. So I'm thinking, if it's a sequel, we're going to start it in Hollow Bastion, the new Hollow Bastion. So to answer the first question, where do we start? In the city of Radiant Garden, Gale, Ash, and Bryn. Now, what do we want them to be doing? What is their goal? And how are they going to be connected to the original? Now, I think the best in all of the trio's sort of entrance is having them be Keyblade Masters in training. But I want to go further than that. You got to remember, this whole idea here is to come up with an idea that's difficult. It would be easy to just say, oh, they're Keyblade Masters, and then the Heartless attack, and all the characters they care about die. Like, you could do the classic shitty reboot TV show, which would just be, okay, it's Riku and Kairi and Sora, and they're the teachers at the new school of Keyblades, at the new Keyblade Masters, and they're training everybody, and you have Axel there too, and like all the old characters, the 7 heroes, are all holding their Keyblades, and they're training all these new students, and these 3 are the new trio, and they tell them that they're important, and that they need to do everything, and then they all die, and the new heroes have to go out, and Sora and the other 6, like, heroes are all sucked into darkness, and they're all like, oh shit, we need to go, run, and then they all fucking explode, and then they find out, oh, Xehanort's back, we gotta go get him, you know? That's all boring. Or, ooh, it's the child of Xehanort, ooh. Like, this is all hacky. Let's do something crazy. This is imaginary after all, right? Like, the entire point of this show is to do shit nobody else would do. I mean, I did the sequel to Avatar, and I was like, ooh, they're all a rock band. Like, something that's weird, but interesting. That's the goal in any sort of creative endeavor, is to not do what someone already did. It's to do something no one would do and make them think, oh, that's crazy. How did that work? So, how would a live-action sequel of Kingdom Hearts work where I don't over-include the past and I try to start fresh? Now, I'm not saying I'm not going to include some fucking hints to the original, and I still want Riku in this. Like, I'm putting Riku in this. I know that's easy, but I'm doing it. So to do a sort of live-action sort of Disney thing, which already sounds bad. Live-action Disney is bad. Okay, I want Bryn, Ash, and Gale to be normal kids. I want this to be a fish out of water. They are normal kids. Because Kingdom Hearts 1 was very much, oh, these are just kids living on an island. They want to leave and explore the world. That was their goal. I think these kids should be completely normal, and they should be pushed into this situation by gaining Keyblades. I think the idea of suddenly there's a sword in your hand and you have all this responsibility is really interesting and fun to play with in sort of a movie sense. Because if we're going to do this as a movie, because of course we are, because it's going to be impossible to write it as a TV show, and I really don't think I should do that. Maybe I could. Have I written a narrative TV show yet on this podcast? I don't think I have. I think so far we've done, on like the solo ones, I've done a couple of things, but I haven't done like a narrative TV show. And by narrative TV show, I mean like the super deep and dark, like live action series where like shit gets crazy every season and it's like all about the mystery. You know what I mean? Okay, Gale, Ash, and Bryn are 3 Final Fantasy-esque characters in sort of a live action state. They just wear, you know, they wear basically normal clothes, but they have like buckles and they have a couple of extra zippers, you know? It's that sort of punky, clockworky. It's not steampunk. It's not fantasy. It's like, I don't know how to describe the Final Fantasy style. It's like goth to the extreme, maybe? It's like scene kids on like crack. It's like high level scene kid. So there's these 3 people in their late teens, maybe early 20s if you want to push it. They're living in this city. It's called Radiant Garden. There's ice all around, and then there's like cool ass trains and like clockwork and stuff. And they're just living their normal lives. And in the process of living their normal lives in this sort of safe haven of this small neighborhood they all live in, they notice something in the distance, some kind of dark creature. And they're like, what the fuck is that? And they're kind of living their lives, and they're terrified of this like weird thing they saw, and they're not sure if it was real or not. Then they're sort of warned that something's coming. Maybe in a dream. You keep it real dream-like, because that's how Kingdom Hearts always starts. You definitely start it in that cool-ass Kingdom Hearts dream, where they're like floating through the water, and then they like fall down onto the big circle glass with the, you know, glass panes with each of their faces sort of etched into the stained glass. They see a Heartless and they hear a voice in their head, and the voice is like, they're the Heartless. They are soulless creatures. And like, to really explain Heartless and Nobodies in a really quick succession, this is how I would explain it visually. You're on a stained glass circle picture of yourself and your friends. Your shadow comes to life and it attacks you. It beats you. You fall out of your body and you watch your body change into 2 more people, maybe. Man, it is hard to figure out a visual metaphor. You know what? You would see your friend die and rip in half. Maybe your mentor. You know what? Since Kingdom Hearts never fucking talks about somebody's parents, I'm gonna say fuck it. I'm gonna say, you know what? We're gonna go with the parents. And to add even a little bit more nostalgia, let's say Leon and Yuffie have a kid. That would be interesting. That Gale is Leon and Yuffie's kid. Because I could totally see them making their kid's name Gale. Yeah, we're doing that. Because the cool thing is that they know everything about Kingdom Hearts. They're the lore explainers, right? But they also don't have Keyblades. So they're like the only characters in the story you can take who, if they... Yeah, I'd rather do them than Cloud, because I think Cloud is way too on the nose. You don't want Cloud and Aerith to have a baby and that be a whole thing. I mean, maybe that could be the angsty... You know what? What if all 3 of these kids are like the kids of the Final Fantasy characters? Because I think that'd be pretty cool, because that'd be real, like, fan service, right? Because, like, imagine you go to the movies and, like, you're like, all right, I'm gonna go watch the Kingdom Hearts movie. This is gonna be lame. This is gonna be Disney crap, and it's gonna be terrible, and they're not gonna do anything with the Final Fantasy characters. And then immediately you see a title, and it's like Kingdom Hearts, and, like, right at the beginning it says Radiant Garden. And you're like, oh, fuck, they're, like, doing it. All right. Having gone back and done my research to try to figure out who these characters' parents are, I've decided that these are the Final Fantasy couples that are going to have kids. Now, I don't know shit about Final Fantasy. I've played the games. I was actually a really big 9 fan growing up, so 7 and 8 really mean nothing to me, which is really ironic because 9 is the one that gets the most ignored. Only one of the characters from Final Fantasy 9 is in Kingdom Hearts, and they don't really have that big of a part. But anyway, so I did some research online, very cursory, and I'm sure Final Fantasy fans will argue about this if this thing ever got made, which is impossible to have been made. But there are 3 couples that exist in the Kingdom Hearts story, so I'm gonna make them. They're male-female couples. Sorry, I want them to be, you know, Sephiroth and Cloud having a baby would be fun, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense physically, and just because we want them to be together doesn't mean they're gonna be, you know? So, alright. So there's one character that hasn't been shown in Kingdom Hearts from Final Fantasy VIII that's kind of important, and it's Rinoa. Rinoa Hartley, who clearly should have been in Kingdom Hearts. Her name is fucking Hartley, but she wasn't in Kingdom Hearts, and I think that's a travesty. So I'm going to put her as the center point of this movie in the beginning. I think Final Fantasy VIII fans will lose their shit when they see this old, like, you know, middle-aged Riona, like, talking to her son before she dies. I think that'll fucking... people will lose their shit. Like, not even Kingdom Hearts fans are gonna know who she is. That's the thing that I love, is that it's, like, so niche that even Kingdom Hearts fans don't know who she is, because I didn't know who she was. And reading up on her, it's interesting, and the fact that Nomura made her, and he likes her as a character, means that she would be perfect as, like, an add-in in this, because if you're gonna do an adaptation, you should add to the source material. So, Rinoa Hartley and Squall Leonhart had a son named Gale. Gale is the main character of this story. You know what? Fuck all that. Why should the main character be a male? It's about fucking time we get a main female character. I mean, Aqua almost got to be a main female character, but she was alongside 2 male characters, and then she did get to be the female lead in, you know, 2.9. But do we do the girl as the main character or the guy? Let me look something up. Okay, I know I'm getting caught up on the names of all this stuff, but I was looking into it more, and I think I've figured out how the 3 characters are going to work here. Gale is the daughter of Rinoa Hartley and Squall Leonhart. She's going to be the main character of the story. She has 2 friends, Bryn, who is the child of Tifa and Cloud. I know that pisses a lot of people off because Aerith is still alive, but that's how's it be. Aerith and Zack have a kid named Ash. The 3 of them are close friends who all live in Radiant Garden. They kind of briefly know about Keyblades and the Heartless and the Nobodies and how they're all interacting, but only as much as their parents told them. In the beginning of our story, Gale is sleeping in her room, and she has a dream. This dream shows her flying through the skies and eventually falling deep into the water and drowning under the water. She then flies through the water and floats down to a stained glass circle with pictures of her, her friends, her mother, and her father. The stained glass cracks around her father, and behind her is an image of her mother. Her mother stands behind her, looking at her, and she says, "I wish we would have told you more about our past. I wish we would have prepared you for this." In that moment, she stares at her daughter, and she asks her, "Choose one." 3 weapons appear. One is a staff, one is a sword, and one is a shield. Gale picks one. I don't know which one yet. I think I'm going to have her pick the sword, because I always pick the sword in Kingdom Hearts. I'm sure it's a bad idea. I'm sure it actually completely fucking changes the game. But I always pick the sword. Gale grabs the sword and walks up to her mother. And she asks her, "Is this a dream? Is this real?" Her mother looks at her and says, "Does it matter?" Suddenly, a dark shadow appears behind her mother and pulls her soul out of her body. Her mother then splits into 2 people, one made of darkness and one a shallow husk of a person with no heart. The shadow one stares at her and says, "I am heartless." The silver, empty one looks at her and says, "I am nobody." They both say in unison, "Open the door." Suddenly, Gale wakes up, covered in sweat, confused as fuck. As the audience who doesn't watch Kingdom Hearts is confused, and the Kingdom Hearts fans are like, "Holy shit." And the Final Fantasy fans are like, "Was that Rinoa from Final Fantasy VII? Immediately after this, it cuts to her speaking to her friend, Bryn. Now, I'm not going to decide a gender on Bryn. You can decide it yourself. They're androgynous, and they could be a female. They could be a male. Who knows? But all I know is they're going to be the love interest. But I think we're going to have a love triangle thing going on, because why not? There's 3 of them. That's how it goes in Kingdom Hearts. Bryn is the child of Tifa and Cloud, and they and Gale are great friends, and the 2 of them are talking while they walk through the alleyways of Radiant Garden. As they're walking together, they're going to talk about the dream and about how maybe it means this, maybe it means that, maybe it's connected to those stories our parents used to talk about. During this conversation, they meet up with Ash, the cool bad boy of the group. Ash is the son of Aerith and Zack. Maybe the coolest combo in all of Final Fantasy. It's definitely the angstiest. It'll definitely piss the most people off. He's the son of both of them, and he's the new Riku. He's badass as fuck. That's his whole thing. He's angsty and badass. The 3 of them meet up, and they sit on a stoop and look out at the city over a hill. We can get sort of a Twilight Town clock tower vibe, but they're not actually on a full-on tower. They're just hanging out on a stoop looking over a large hill. The 3 of them begin to talk, and we learn that there's more going on underneath the surface that we should know. And they're trying to figure out what their parents aren't telling them. Immediately afterward, they hear screaming. They run after whoever's in trouble, and they try to help them. And it is revealed that the Heartless are ransacking the city, and that nobodies are also ransacking the city. And this time, they're working together. They've never done that before. They even see an Unversed in the distance, something that most Kingdom Hearts fans will miss. These CG darkness creatures are going to be more terrifying than their Disney counterpart. And they are going to be creepy shadows and terrifying glimmers of light. And the Unversed are going to look more like suits than shadows or silver. They're going to look more suit-like they're wearing armor. The Final Fantasy-esque characters are going to be running away from all this, and they are going to see these monsters and try to run from them. But in the moment, suddenly, all 3 of our heroes have mystical swords that appear in their hands, keyblades, giant keys with magical powers. Bryn's will be filled with magic, and they'll have more of a ranged capability, shooting these magical spells out of them. Ash's will be a shield, and they'll protect the people running away. And Gale's will be a sword. And you know what? Fuck it. It's got a gun on it, because she's Squall's kid. She's got a revolver sword keyblade, the most ridiculous of weapons ever constructed. The 3 of them are going to fight off the Heartless, and the Heartless and Nobodies and Unversed will vanish, terrified only by their keyblades and nothing else around them. No weapon stops them other than these 3. Afterward, to move it along, I think the cops should show up and be confused. The city guard of Radiant Garden should show up and arrest them for causing all this trouble as persons of interest. They're going to be sitting in their cages, and then they're going to be bailed out by none other than Squall and Renoa. The Keyblades in each of the kids' hands will vanish, and Squall and Renoa will pull them out of the police station. They're going to ask them what they did, why they did this, what was going on, and the kids are going to ask these two what the hell is going on and what's up with the Heartless and the Darkness and the Nobodies and the Unversed and all these horrifying things. After this, the parents are going to be apprehensive and not want to talk to them, and they're going to say, all right, we need to go to the Restoration Club. And they said, we haven't been there in a long time. And they say, well, we have to do it. They are then brought to the exact same base that Sora went in Kingdom Hearts 2, the Restoration Committee base, where the Tron computer is and all that crazy shit. And they're going to bring them in and sit them down and try to explain around the table where the Ansem painting is and all the stuff, the scientific research center where Ansem did all his Heartless research. And they're going to try to explain what's going on. In the process of explaining, they are attacked. All of the Final Fantasy characters try to fight the Heartless, but it's difficult because they do not have Keyblades, and they can do damage to them, but it's not as strong as it could be. The kids, pulling out Keyblades, shock the parents, and they realize, oh my god, you have Keyblades. They try to get the kids out of there, and one by one they are each defeated by the Heartless and the Nobodies, turned into various monsters. In the end, Squall barricades the door as the three kids are holding back, Squall and Cloud. Cloud is behind the door as he fights off the Heartless, but they take him out. Leon then shuts the door and looks at them and says that these are stronger than they've ever been. You need to escape this world. There's a ship out in the back. Get in the ship, ask it to take you to the Keyblade Masters. Once they do that, Leon shuts the door and he says, go. Renoa speaks to her daughter one last time and tells her, we're going to hold them back and you're going to go. You're going to find other people like you with weapons like yours. They'll teach you how to use your weapons and what to do, and you will save the world. After which, the Heartless will push through and she will fight back against them, and the three of them, run away into the night to get aboard their ship. The ship they find will obviously be the Gummy ship, because why not? They're going to get in this ridiculous-looking, childlike ship and fly away from the world. From then on, it's going to be your pretty standard TV show. Every episode is going to take place in a different Disney world where things are slightly more realistic and slightly more over the top. It's the next generation of each story. So you're going to get Aladdin, but like Aladdin and Jasmine's kids. If you really wanted to, you could tie this into shitty live-action Disney. I would say no, don't do that. But I can guarantee that Disney's going to do that stupid shit. But maybe this will make it all good. You would get Maleficent played by Angelina Jolie, and she would be the Maleficent from Kingdom Hearts, which is like super dark Maleficent, like mastermind. That could be pretty fucking cool. Actually, I'm going to add, Ash likes the fighting more than everyone else, and he's going to see an image of Maleficent played by Angelina Jolie for a split second. But every week, they're going to go on adventures together. We're not going to have a Donald and Goofy-esque sidekick bullshit. It's going to be 3 Final Fantasy characters exploring these bizarre Disney worlds. And the fun of it is going to be that you know what's going on in the Disney world, but they don't. And then you are surprised because the Disney world isn't what you expected, because this is like 20 years later. So this is... to really sell this show, here's the movie pitch I have for you. I'm going to make it up on the spot. Have you ever heard of Kingdom Hearts? Isn't that the most complicated story ever made? Isn't that overly confusing? Well, I found a way to make it into a live-action TV show that doesn't suck. Haha, that's ridiculous. Why would I do that? What if there was a TV show where 3 late teens, early 20s friends from the Final Fantasy universe, the children of Final Fantasy characters that people have been shipping for generations and arguing about, these 3 kids are going to be exploring the future of Disney properties. So, what happens to Aladdin 20 years later? What happens to Beauty and the Beast 20 years later? And if you really want me to do it, we could tie it into live-action Disney, and we can redeem live-action Disney by turning it into Kingdom Hearts. They would say, that's interesting. We're not allowed to touch Kingdom Hearts in any way. And then I'd have to go pitch this to Nomura, and I'd say, Nomura, what do you think about me taking the thing you love and recreating it in live action and going to all the Disney worlds 20 years later? He's probably going to be against it and throw me out. But just imagine a world where this all came true. This is what that show would be. I actually think this would be a really, really good show, now that I'm thinking about it. You know, when I first started this idea, I was like, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to figure this out. But no, I actually really like this idea now. I actually love these characters. There's so much room. I might write the whole fucking thing right now, because I basically just did. Holy shit, all I gotta do is listen back to this, and then I can immediately sit down and just write the script for this. Holy shit, I can't believe I did it. Wow. That was the secret. The secret to figuring out Kingdom Hearts was to go even deeper to the Final Fantasy side. So yeah, to run it all by one more time, Gale, Ash, and Bryn are the children of the Final Fantasy characters who all grew up in Radiant Garden, the city that the Final Fantasy people have rebuilt. After 20 years, the Heartless and the Nobodies and the Unversed have been gone, hiding in the shadows. But now they've returned to eat all of life again. Somehow now, they are stronger than they've ever been. The three heroes, now armed with Keyblades, unaware of the significance of the power that they hold, must now travel across the apocalyptic 20-year-later versions of all Disney futures to find the Keyblade Masters of old, the 7 heroes from Kingdom Hearts 3. Throughout their journeys, we're going to meet the children of various Disney characters, and they are going to explore the Disney universe. I think it's going to be fucking awesome. And as always, thanks for listening. Bye.